Hey, this is Lance with 20 Sided Tonight, and today we're going over traps in Starfinder. The rules for traps start on page 410 of the Starfinder core rulebook. Traps are primarily used by GMs who want to make non-combat encounters interesting and keep players on their toes. However, they can also be used in combat, and a little later in this video, I'll go over how traps can be a viable option for imaginative players. Aside from the name, there are 8 core elements of all traps: challenge rating, experience points gained, type, perception DC, disable, trigger, reset, and effect. These can be found on a trap stat block, and remember to fill this in if you're making traps of your own. When dealing with traps, there are a few staples to consider. A trap's CR is much like that of a monster or NPC's challenge rating. It can help to determine what would be an appropriate threat to the party, and what makes sense when thinking about what resources the NPCs would have when laying the trap. A low-level goblin encounter would likely have the standard examples of a laser blast trap in their lair, and it would seem heavy-handed to crank up the damage or accuracy of this trap against a first-level party. When making your own traps or modifying existing examples, consider the chart listed on page 412 of the core rulebook when adjusting these base stats for a trap. Traps, like most any encounter in Starfinder, have the chance to grant experience points. Think of this as the PCs learning to check for things that seem out of place or become aware when things are quiet. Too quiet. Disabling a trap, as well as detecting and avoiding it, are both ways to gain experience points. The CRB also mentions that you can gain experience points by enduring its effects, but I'm not a fan of this approach. Going by raw, the points gained are flat, as shown on the trap stat block. Although, I'd probably tier the XP dished out, determined by how the players deal with the trap. Full experience for disabling it, half to 75% for detecting and avoiding it, and up to 25% for simply enduring the effects of a trap. The type of trap determines if it's analog, where no advanced technology past simple machines or magics are present. Technological and magical traps may have greater technology such as circuit boards or advanced runes, and some may be more susceptible or resistant to certain spells or tactics, depending on its type. To detect a trap, a creature must succeed a perception check against the trap's perception DC. On a success, the character detects the trap. To disable the trap, for those interacting with it and have succeeded its DC, those interacting with it must make a skill check determined by the type they're up against: engineering for mechanical traps, mysticism for magical, and a computer's check when there's a bit of hacking involved. These aren't set in stone and can be changed at the DM's discretion when making your own. Additionally, you can call for multiple checks to be performed by multiple players for more intricate design. Disabling a trap can tip off the inhabitants of a lair or the area that their security has been breached. Bypassing or disabling and resetting a trap can avoid this and may be a more desirable option. For example, if you're trying to sneak into an area, there could be a silent alarm saying that when a sentry gun has gone off or detected an enemy, and how many cartridges have been spent. The trigger of a trap is what sets them off. This can be a pressure plate being activated, laser wire being tripped, or even a specific language being spoken in an area, in case you want to keep those filthy elves out. The trigger is listed in the trap's description. When considering what would trigger the trap, keep in mind tiny or smaller creatures don't often set off a trap. The reset time is the cooldown time of a trap. Some traps, like our laser blast trap, reset after a minute, but others, such as most analog traps, like the pit trap, need to be reset manually. Something to consider with traps that need to be reset manually: this could also tip off those who created the trap that something's afoot. Typically well-built pit traps made by kobolds or goblins don't fall down under their own weight. While a trap is in its reset period, the player characters can attempt to disable a trap at a lower risk, even using the Take 20 action to disable the trap. The effect of a trap can vary widely and add a lot of variety into a game, from a sinking cloud of gas which saps a group's strength dealing ability damage or even ability drain more harshly there, or the all too familiar dread of laser maelstrom. There are a variety of creatures and villains who could use a trap, such as dirty party members or elves, scavengers looking to protect their hordes, and corporations such as the Aspis Consortium can make traps to keep those out, or people foolhardy enough to enter their lairs, keep them in so their secrets will remain safe. However, there are things which can be considered traps but are intended to be as such. For example, if your party wrecks another ship during space combat and then decides to board the downed vessel, anything from an unshielded power core sending out bolts of electricity to the unsuspecting party members, malfunctioning doors opening to the vacuum of space, or a cargo hold full of angry and scared beasts charging the group when the sealed doors are opened, are examples of unintentional traps. Much like crafting any item, the creation of a trap takes time, imagination, and resources. I'd have a player follow the same rules and guidelines to making a trap as was listed in the core rulebook. The cost of materials would be at GM discretion. Factors that could change the monetary cost could be if the players are retrofitting an existing item, such as an azimuth artillery laser the group no longer uses, or a handful of grenades and some rope. And the cost of a simple pit trap wouldn't be anything more than the cost of a shovel and some elbow grease. Using the basic crafting rules in the video here, or the rules on page 235 of the Starfinder core rulebook, it could simply take some time and whatever resources are at hand. Traps could be useful to a player when they'd want to defend their ship, or if they want to set a stage for combat rather than simply going out and fighting a creature on an even playing field. Some other reasons a player would want to take time to create a trap would be when fighting an enemy head-on would be suicide, or otherwise not an ideal situation. Some traps, like those which ensnare an enemy, could be useful to a party of bounty hunters who would rather capture their quarry, dealing as minimal damage as possible and mitigating whatever threats would befall the group, rather than the tried and true shoot it until it stops running. If you're designing a trap of your own, there are a few key components that shouldn't be overlooked. Perception and disable DCs. This indicates what roles a potential victim must succeed in order to spot the trap, and if they're looking to disable the thing, what check or checks they'll need to make. These can be different checks. If your trap does require multiple checks, use the DC for a trap with the CR2 lower than your trap to avoid making things too high of a challenge. This can be seen if something's going to spread itself thin while needing different firewalls to overcome, but then also different hardware to finagle through. It can be hard to accommodate for every backup the more intricate your trap is. If your trap can be bypassed, use this DC for bypassing the traps as well as disabling it. Initiative. Traps act on their own initiative in combat, and this modifier is just used to indicate when in combat this trap's effects take place, such as when, during, or around that laser blast trap is going to be accosting the party members, and when the goblins are going to have their turn to shoot out with their junk pistols. The EAC and KAC. Since traps can be target like any other object in Starfinder, they also have an EAC and a KAC. This can mean what mechanical parts are exposed, runes to be broken, and so on, or just how easily they are to hit, like a wall-mounted turret. Just like a trap has EAC and KAC, they also have hit points. Some traps have immunities to certain kinds of damage, but nonetheless, when a trap drops to 0 hit points, it is destroyed. Be careful though, if you're shooting at something like a trap that's set to explode, it will, well, explode. It'd be a good idea to keep in mind what may happen if someone simply blows a trap up instead of disabling it or bypassing it. Attacks and damage. The point of most traps are to damage or hinder their targets in some way. This section goes over attack bonuses and how much damage is dealt, and how many targets are affected, including what additional effects your trap might have, such as ensnaring them or dealing ability damage and so on. Some traps, such as the pit trap, have saves. Consider this especially if your trap is meant to do something beyond simply dealing damage to the target. This can be a falling weighted net could require a reflex save in order to dodge, or a gas bomb that is filling an area may require a fortitude save in order to shrug off its effects. Speaking of saves, some traps may also have good and poor saves. This is determined by the creator of said trap, and they'll have a good or poor save of either reflex or fortitude. Most traps won't have a will save, but if they do, they are considered a poor save. While you can design your own traps, keep in mind the party shouldn't need to come to the exact conclusion to disable the trap in order to succeed. That'd be a surefire way of killing the group's ingenuity. That about covers the gist of traps in Starfinder. I hope you GMs and players get the chance to use them. And for you players out there, would you find yourself setting up traps in your combat encounters, or do you think that's more the role for GMs? Let us know down in the comments below, and bye for now.